All right. So, what I was going to do for the whole group of you in here, um, Dr. Mitchell and I will just have a conversation up here, and let's see here, maybe we end at 1:45. Are you good until like 1:30? Okay, great. Because what I'll probably do is maybe about 35 minutes, give or take, kind of roll with it, see how the conversation goes up front. You go ahead, take your notes. But as you're taking your notes, if you've got some additional questions or follow-up questions that maybe I don't explain or go into more detail as you would have liked, then you'll have an opportunity for some Q&A with Dr. Mitchell here after we finish up front. And then, like I said, I kind of wanted the last 15 minutes or so of class, 1:30, 1:45, kind of debrief, go over a couple things, with you in preparation for the assignment. So what they'll be doing then is after we go through this interview from their notes, we're talking about feature writing. So coming up with a theme, some sort of specific angle, not really a profile, but a feature story that of course is sport related or sport administration related. So just for the record then, can you spell your name and offer your title?
Jeff Mitchell, Jeffmitchell, and I have the good fortune of serving as the Director of Athletics at Ball State.
And I had noted that your alma mater, it's Millsaps College in Jackson, Mississippi. Two-time graduate there, undergrad MBA, and then the JD, Juris Doctorate from University of Mississippi. So is it fair that Mississippi, that's your stomping grounds, or where else would you call home?
It is. I grew up in Mississippi, grew up in a small town called Magnolia, which is 100 miles due north of New Orleans. So I'm a Southwest Mississippi boy, and went to college in the state. Had the good fortune to go to business school as well, and couldn't shake the idea of going to law school, so stayed in the state to go to law school. But then I went out west and started my professional career post education in the Bay Area of California.
Santa Clara.
Santa Clara,
yeah.
Right, and was there for about 12 years before moving back to Mississippi for a number of years prior to coming to the Midwest.
Yeah, I noticed too, you played baseball in college.
Yes.
First base, right field?
Middle infielder, second base primarily.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, just curious. I was first base. And see about Pete Rose? I did. Yeah, it's kind of a tragedy there for that sport. Right. Well, what other sports besides baseball did you play maybe in high school?
In high school, I played 1 year of soccer. We started our team and I needed the help. I don't know that I was an asset, but I was able to wear a jersey and run around. And I played tennis. So my two primary sports were baseball and tennis.
Singles or dubs on tennis?
Both.
Both of them? Yeah. Do you have a preference?
I really am better from a tennis standpoint at playing doubles than I was at singles. Yeah.
Great. That's also my sport. But I noticed you coached, and it was baseball, if I remember right. So kind of curious. I could tell that you coached baseball, but it seemed like it was a bit of a while ago. So from your estimation, then, how have players changed from when you were coaching to what you observe now?
Yeah, so I coached right out of college. So when I graduated from Millsaps, this would have been back in 2001, I was afforded the opportunity to run the media relations office for the Department of Athletics. I'd been a 4-year student worker in addition to playing baseball. And I couldn't get it out of my system, though, of wanting to be on the field. And so my college coach, after a 1-year absence, I didn't want anything to do with the team. I needed the separation because my playing career was over effectively at that point. And I wanted the opportunity to still be around the game, but I needed the separation. So it took a year. And then the second year that I was finishing up MBA school, I coached and really enjoyed it. And I didn't have any responsibilities other than showing up for practice and for games. Didn't have to recruit. I didn't have to do any of that because I had this other full-time gig. I would say that people change and adapt as the world changes and adapts, and as generations come and go. So I don't know that there's a terrible difference in how student athletes approach a particular game. I do think, though, that our coaches, our professors, those who mold and shape students have to adjust a little bit to maybe the way that students show up. But the game of baseball is still the same. And so you have to teach it in a very simple way. It's a relatively simple game. It's nuanced, but it's simple. And you have to try to reach them. So I don't know that students have changed all that much. But if they're effective in how you coach and how you teach, then you can adjust to whatever the student athlete or the student is bringing. So I know maybe that's an unconventional answer, because I just don't. I refuse to. I refuse to believe this changed that much.
Well, you mentioned as a coach, you have to reach them.
Right.
So how do you do that? Or how would you do that?
Yeah, well, for me, it's establishing a culture of belief, so as a matter of fact, and I still coach youth baseball to this day. So I use this with, and I guess that's why I'm shaping an opinion, because we're dealing with those that are 10, 11, 12 years old, and the game's the same, and you reach them the same way. Now they may be distracted, their attention spans may be a little bit different, so I'll allow that to happen. But if we approach it in a way that they can digest the information that we're trying to convey to them, and they're receiving it and applying it, then we're reaching them. So having them understand that, I ask almost every practice, how many of you believe that you're really good at what you do? And it's an affirmation practice where they have to raise their hand, because I'm not going to coach them if they don't believe that they're really good at what they do. But the reality is some of them aren't really good at what they do, but we have to reach them and make them think that they are, and then apply whatever weakness that they have and strengthen it, right? And those that are strong in something, we have to make it even better. How many of you believe that you're really good at what you do? Hands go up. There we go. A few of you are buying into it already, right? Of course. So if you're showing up that way, then I want to coach you. If you're showing up that way, I want to teach you. So that's how I kind of learned that from my college coach, who's been there 30 some odd years. And he never asked the question directly, but he always showed up as, I'm coaching you guys because you deserve to be here and you've worked hard to be here. And so let's go get after it.
Well, you mentioned one of your coaches, a college coach. So I'm kind of curious, what could be an interaction or an exchange of some kind that you once had with that coach, or maybe any coach you had, that at the time you thought was unnecessary or too much, but then as you look back on it now, realize it was useful?
So I'll tell you a quick story. I will not use the choice language that was used, but you can imply it. So my first day as a college baseball player was the fall of 1997. So fall practice. And our coach is a hitting coach. Jim Page is his name, and he's a dear friend, love him. And he invited all the freshmen every year to hit on the field. It was the first thing we did, because he was a hitting guy. He wanted to know if we could hit. And recruiting's a little bit different at the Division III level. So I had may have been seen in one or two games. I wasn't highly recruited by any means, and was privileged to accept this offer to play at Millsaps. And it was my turn. Mitchell get in the cage. So I got in by the cage. We're talking about the little dome, the turtle that's on the field. He literally wanted to see the ball fly off the bat, see how we swung the bat. And I took 3 swings. And he said, Jeff, why don't you step out of the cage? He wasn't mad. He wasn't excited either. He just said, Jeff, why don't you get out of the cage? So I walked over to where he was. I'm a right-handed hitter. He was standing to my, if I'm doing this, he's standing right there. So I went to him. He said, hey, who taught you how to hit? Still didn't know where this was going. And I said, well, my high school coach, and I wasn't too sure of my answer. So it kind of stated it as a question, my high school coach. And he said, well, the next time you see him, you tell him he bleeping sucks. Okay. And it was kind of funny, right? There were some guys standing around, they kind of chuckled. I kind of chuckled because, I mean, I'm scared to death, right? My first practice. Like, you tell him he effing sucks, right? So that's pretty much what he said. And he said, but I want you to go to our cage that was down below the field. He said, I'm going to be there in 5 minutes. I'm going to teach you how to hit. So I'm really, really nervous going into this private instruction session. And he comes down and he said, Jeff, and we were there for 4 years, right? There wasn't a lot of transferring that was happening at this point. He said, look, over the course of the next 4 years, you're going to turn into a great hitter. And I believed him. I believed him in that moment. So that first part, maybe in the moment, was a little bit too much, but I reflect on it now as a humorous part of my experience. But what I really resonated with was he was trying to lighten the mood, but also turn something into, he saw some potential and said, I'm going to teach you. Right. And he did. I gave him credit. I learned how to hit. And again, by no means was I an all-star type of player, but I did end up hitting 412 as a senior. And I think that I have some of his style in me in terms of I'm not telling that story to anybody, or I'm not going to say that to a player, but at the same time, I do want to teach him how to hit.
Well, now I'm curious. As he taught you, how to hit correctly, quote unquote, was it in fact wrong than your previous coach, the one who effing sucked, or was
I didn't know how to hit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that I had probably not been. I'd probably not been taught. Right. I got by on some natural talent and was just okay. And sometimes at the high school level, even the youth level, you're not going to tweak with something that seems to be fine. And it's not until you go to a sport or any type of enterprise that you're a part of at a higher level where you really begin to refine what you do. And so I didn't know that I couldn't hit until I was told that I couldn't. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I just thought I was okay. And then all of a sudden I'm told I can't hit. Like, whoa. But I never did. I never lost any confidence because he was right there with me saying, I'm going to teach you how to do it. Like, there's something to work with. So it's not like we're learning from scratch, but yeah.
Well, the 412 part two, I mean, how did that stack up then with your baseball peers? Were you kind of middle of the pack or a little bit above that?
It was probably right along some of our better hitters. Now, again, I mean, in full disclosure, I wasn't the everyday starter. So I was a spot starter. I was a pinch hitter. He told me that about halfway through my career, so after my sophomore year, like, you're my first call off the bench. Right. So I knew my role. And there were times where, of course, the second baseman wasn't playing, or got hurt, and I would start or play third a little bit. And so I was always ready because I knew almost every game my number was going to be called at some point. And so, yeah, I mean, 412 is pretty good.
Well, and earlier too, you had mentioned at that time, you said you're there for 4 years, transferring didn't really, it didn't happen with the frequency that maybe it happens today.
Right.
So I'm kind of curious, back to present day, what's your take on that transfer portal? I'll open the door to NIL too and let you go whichever direction you want, but I'm kind of curious where you are on those innovations.
So it's challenging, right? But hear me when I say that I am a proponent for student athletes to benefit off their name, image, and likeness. No different than I am for anybody to benefit off their name, image, and likeness, but you got to work for it, right? We all enjoy the freedom of benefiting from who we are, what we look like, what our name is, but you have to work for it. Like, it's not just inherently given to you. And the same thing with our student athletes. Um, we're in an interesting time when the NIL is a very real thing, but it's a very real thing for a very finite amount of student athletes. But there's a category, you know, you guys may, I don't know how much of you are following all of the craziness that's happening in my business, but the concept of NIL collectives, where money's being pulled together and it's just being thrown at a student athlete. You hear these stories about this exorbitant amount of money. That's not true NIL. That's essentially pay for play. And there's arguments left and right about whether that's should be permissible, whether it's not. There's a lot of litigation happening. It includes all of this stuff. I don't know what the future is going to look like. I really don't, and nobody does. Anybody that tells you otherwise is just speculating, because we don't know. But what I do know is that I think we're trying to get to a point where, if college athletics is changing, if professional athletics is changing, if higher education is changing, then we need to be ready to pivot. And so we have to be creative with how we operate. And I'm a part of this is deeper than you ever wanted to know. I'm a part of a think tank that our conference commissioner has employed. Our first meeting is actually this coming Monday in Detroit, where we're going to talk about athletics within the league, within the MAC, and what it looks like going forward. And we're using the current litigation that's happening in the athletics enterprise right now as a guiding point. So if the settlement goes through, where it's a $2.8 billion settlement that the NCAA and some of the Autonomy 5 conferences are a part of, the Mid-American Conference is considered to be a co-conspirator in this litigation. And so we're having to pay some money as a part of this settlement. So what is that? If it goes through, if the settlement happens, what does college athletics look like in the next 10 years with that settlement as a guiding post? What if it doesn't go through? What if the judge rejects the settlement? What if it just blows up at the 11th hour and there is no settlement and effectively bankrupts the NCAA? What does college athletics look like then, through the lens of the Mid-American Conference, of which Ball State's an affiliate, right, or a member? And so that's going to tell us a lot about what NIL looks like, what eligibility looks like, and what the quote unquote business of college athletics looks like going forward. So there's a lot to that. But in terms of, if there is value to one's name, to one's image, to one's likeness, then I believe that anybody, whether they're a student athlete or not, should be able to benefit from it. But you just have to work for it.
Well, and so you're around student athletes at the collegiate level, like what we were just talking about. But going back to earlier, you're around, we'll call them student athletes, but you said they're 8, 9, 10 years old. Those are very different age groups. So I'm kind of curious. I mean, knowledge and skill level of the sport is obviously going to be different. But besides that, what other differences do you notice, either in the attitude or the love of the game or the passion for the game? I'm kind of curious more of those X factors, the differences between that younger age group and the collegiate age group.
I think students, and we'll just use that term, students begin to differentiate themselves as they get more passionate about what they're doing and more competitive, whether it's in sports or the arts or something else, right? The more competitive you are at it, the more intense you work at it, that is going to separate you, right? The hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard, right? There's plenty of talented individuals, but if they're not actually working diligently at whatever it is that they're doing, they're eventually going to get passed up by those that are working hard. Right? You can take people in my position. We've worked really hard to get to where we are. Are we the most talented? I don't know, but that really, I don't ever. I'm blending answers here, but I don't know that talent never factored into where I wanted to be professionally. I just always worked hard at it and wanted to be the best I could be at whatever it was that I was doing, right? So the same thing applied to athletics. And at a point where I knew I wanted to play college baseball, knew I could play college baseball, and wanted to be coached, then I continued to work hard to be the best I could do. And I think that's a differentiator, a separator, when you're looking at children who are 8 to 10, 11, 12 years old. And yeah, you don't want to take the fun out of it, but at some point, everything changes and they're just a little bit more competitive. So you got to challenge them a little bit more, and it just shifts when they can see an end goal, which is, hey, I want to play at that next level.
You've been an athletics director and administrator for, by my count, roughly 20 years. I think it's
Right.
18 or so, going all the way back to Santa Clara University. So I'm curious what sent you in this direction, given that you've been a coach and you've been a player. What propelled you into the administrative route?
So I'll tell you this, another story. So I'm at Millsaps, I'm in MBA school, and I'm serving as the director of media relations. I was going to law school right out of college. That was my ticket. My dad's an attorney. I figured I was just going to be an attorney too and go. And then I had this good fortune to be invited by the college president, who stopped me in the middle of campus. We just happened to cross paths, a small campus, right? So college president kind of knows who you are. 1,000 students, tiny. And he said, Jeff, you're going to get a job offer later today, and you're going to take it, and you're going to go to business school. And I told him, the gentleman's name was George Harmon. He's deceased now. George was a diminutive human being, tiny, but he was a powerful man. He was the college president for 20 years. Did great things. He said, he pointed his finger at me, like looking up at me. You're getting a job offer later today, and you're going to take it, and you're going to go to MBA school. And I said, well, yes, sir. I just want the conversation to be over, right? Yes, sir. I got to go. And sure enough, I get this job offer later that day to be the director of sports information. And oh, this is interesting. And then the offer to go to business school was there too. And I took that. So I committed for 2 years to run media relations, to go to business school. But I couldn't shake the idea of going to law school. And I especially couldn't shake it after I read an article in the Sport Business Journal that referenced Andy Geiger. Andy Geiger may not resonate with you guys. He was the former athletic director at Ohio State. And he was quoted in this article saying that the future leaders in intercollegiate athletics administration were going to be those with a business background and or a law background. And the minute I read that quote is the day I decided that I was definitely going to go to law school. I had deferred my acceptance, so I knew I was in, but I wasn't sure. I read that article, boom, I'm finishing MBA school, I'm going to law school, because at that point I had decided that I wanted to pursue a career in higher ed, specifically in athletics administration. So I went to law school after that, and life happens, like you guys are going to experience life. My college sweetheart, who we had kind of gone our separate ways for a little while. We rekindled a relationship while I was in law school, and she just happened to have moved to the Bay Area of California. And so when I finished law school, we got married, and I joined her in the Bay Area. And so I knocked on doors in the Bay Area, and that's how I landed at Santa Clara. So I've got experience working out in athletics, 2 years, plus what I was doing at Ole Miss in law school. I was working in the athletics department then too, an MBA, a law degree, and I still had to volunteer at Santa Clara to even get a foot in the door because I didn't know anybody.
That's kind of who you know, and
Yeah,
as much as what you know.
yeah.
It's true in our field as well.
No doubt.
Kind of curious what makes Ball State then unique compared to previous roles like Santa Clara.
Every campus is different, and every campus is different in how it approaches athletics. Every campus is different, probably how it approaches anything, right? It's just there's different cultures. There's a broad culture. There are smaller mini cultures within that broad culture. This is the first place where I've truly experienced a high level of collaboration across campus. So I have the good fortune of sitting on the president's cabinet. So we've got, there are 11 vice presidents sitting around the room. And yeah, I've been here for 18 months now, and not once have I faced any level of trying to find a word here, and I can't find it for some reason right now. No obstacle, we'll just, for lack of a better word. Nobody has said, no, Jeff, we don't support you in doing X, whatever that is. Similarly, I don't recall a time in those 18 months where a colleague has said something around that table where I've just said, no, that's not going to happen, right? Because we want to be partners in helping our students and student athletes both thrive. So that is not necessarily unique to this place, but it is certainly different than what I've experienced at other places. And I've really enjoyed the other places where I worked. Santa Clara was fabulous. I was there for a long time. University of Southern Mississippi, Hattiesburg, Mississippi is a great place, but not even close to the level of collaboration that at least I experienced on our campus here at Ball State, and how that then trickles down to the student experience. And again, my lens is mostly through the student athlete experience, and it doesn't mean there's not challenges, but there's support to help them be successful.
What do you think most fans or spectators don't understand, or maybe they misunderstand, or just don't know about collegiate athletics?
It's like the question of the day. It's a good one. It's a really complex part of campus. It's a very complex enterprise right now. The job of the athletic director, and I'm not just saying this because I am one, yeah, because I've been around for the last 2 decades, and I have mentors that help prepare me to be in this situation. But the job today is much more complex than it ever has been. And there's more legal issues, there's more business issues, there's more emphasis on revenue generation, not just fundraising, but business deals. There's more emphasis on leadership, there's more emphasis on communication. It's much more of a CEO type of job than it used to be. It used to be that if you were the football coach or the basketball coach, you just roll into being the athletic director too, right? And it's a much more complex job. And so the industry as a whole, because there's a lot of attention on it, because there are certain expectations, because there's, quite frankly, a lot of money that rolls through it, and it depends on the level, it just creates different challenges. And coaches have different expectations for their respective programs. You know, we're at Ball State, when you factor in our 450 plus student athletes, approximately 130 full-time employees, you know, the quick math there puts you, you know, close to 600 human beings. And that's a lot when you're dealing with it within a particular organization. And whether you want to hear this or not, human beings cause problems. They're awesome. Human beings are awesome, but they also cause problems. So you have to navigate the different leadership challenges that come with it. And then you have to fit into the broader mission of the institution. We're just a component of the broader university. And that's very clearly the way I see it. It's the way it needs to be seen. And there's a public component to it. There's media obligations. So what I say gets either recorded or printed, right? So I have to be careful about my words and my body language. When I go to the grocery store, you never know who's in there, right? And if I say something flippant at a high school game, somebody hears it and says, well, I just heard the athletic director say this, right? And so that's part of it. And depends on where you live. The Bay Area is so saturated. You could go to the grocery store and be anonymous, in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, or in Muncie, Indiana, I almost always see somebody at home, right? So sometimes you just call Walmart to just deliver your food to you, you know, it's easier that way. I'm kidding.
Well, yeah, I'm a high school.
Somebody laughed. Thank you
Yeah,
for saying-
yeah.
thank you for laughing.
High school coach, so yeah, I understand about being in the spotlight, you know, when you're getting gas, when you're getting, you know,
yeah.
groceries,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
It's-
like,
and
I live
coaches-
like two.
Coaches the same way, like
Mhm.
college coaches, it was tough sometimes, especially if things aren't going your way.
Well, you mentioned complex enterprise. So then I'm curious, what's been your most rewarding situation in spite of that complexity as an athletics administrator? So describe for us, if you can, a situation where you felt like you truly made a difference.
Yeah, I think that comes in a couple of different ways, one of which is, so one of the jobs that I had early in my career, post my media relations job, was being the director of compliance at Santa Clara. And that was where I had to use some of my legal skills. There are countless stories of having a situation where a student athlete is ineligible for one reason or another, and working to get them eligible and putting them on a path to success. So there's a story of a young man who there had been an issue. It wasn't the student's fault. It was just an administrative error. And we had to file a waiver to get the student eligible. And it turned out to be, you know, he was, turned out to be like the all-time leading scorer in that particular sport throughout his career there. And I was there for that entire time, had helped get him eligible, and then continued. I was a sport administrator for that sport too. So I just got to know him more and more, and encourage him. And all of a sudden he goes out and now he's in the Hall of Fame at the college, and just a neat deal. So were it not for that effort to get him eligible, and again, wasn't anything that he had done, it was just an administrative situation that's too complicated, and I won't go into any details with you because frankly, you guys probably don't care about it. But the point of the story is that what I did in those weeks leading up to getting him eligible and having the NCAA call me saying the guy's good to go, it's pretty gratifying when you can essentially course correct a student's experience at that particular institution.
That's great. And then earlier when you were talking about 400 some athletes and that number of staff members and that people, you had worded it as people can cause problems, but the way I'm framing that for this question is that people are unique and have needs.
Absolutely.
So in that context, from your purview with the current group of collegiate student athletes, what need or needs do you commonly identify or hear about?
Yeah. You know, it's hard to be a student today. I think it's hard to be a student athlete today. There's a lot of demands on you guys, and you know, there are probably expectations that you face. There's certainly expectations that our student athletes face. They put a lot on themselves. They work hopefully diligently in the classroom. At the same time, they're putting in a lot of time on the practice field. I think that providing space and time for gosh, this can apply to you and me too, right? We've got to take time to grow as humans, to take time for ourselves, because I know I'm better at home as a dad, as a husband, when I feel good. And I'm better as a leader on this campus and within our athletics department when I feel good. So if I'm working out, if I'm eating well, if I'm sleeping well, or getting enough sleep, I am better. I know that about myself. I am better when I stay up too late doing emails like I did last night, and because evidently wasn't very good at my job yesterday because I overbooked myself and didn't get it, just piled up, and I felt like I had to get it all done before I went to sleep. So today I woke up a little sluggish. I'm good now because I'm energized by doing this. But um, you have to be able to take care of yourself first, lead yourself first, and then you can lead others. And I think there are times where we don't do a good enough job of that with our students, with our student athletes, of encouraging them to lead themselves well first, whether that's in providing them resources from a mental health standpoint, nutrition standpoint. Um, like we've got to be better in that space because I do believe that that translates into success academically for the student athlete and athletically for the student athlete and socially for the student athlete. And I think we're just beginning to skim the surface on what we can do to foster that because we've long been entrenched in this culture of the only way to define success is by winning as many games as you can, winning as many championships as you can, which is a great product, a great outcome. But what are we really doing to establish this 40, 50 years of sustainable growth and development, leadership, and health if we're not really emphasizing what's most important in the first place, which is to put our students in a position to thrive, to feel good about what they're doing. And I think sometimes we miss the boat on that.
So more emphasis on the means as much as the results.
Yeah.
The end.
Yeah.
Well, then my last question, and then I'll go full group here. And you were leading in that direction anyway, so this is a good segue.
Sure.
If you had to tweet, so 280 characters, right? Keep it short and sweet. What's your administrative philosophy as an athletics director?
So I'm going to elaborate more on and not just give 280 words, but so I would encourage you guys, not today, because you can't do it today. You're going to have to let your life experience dictate this. It took me a while, but you've got to identify some core values. Okay. So if I were to tweet this, though, it would be my core values, which is positivity, communication, helpfulness, and a growth mindset. So I've got these things up in my office and I see them every day. So I'm going to lead with positivity. I'm going to lead with communication. I'm going to lead with helpfulness, and I'm going to lead with a growth mindset. And I try to do those 4 things every single day. Every single day. And so how many odd characters that is? Leadership equals growth mindset, or pardon me, positivity, communication, helpfulness, and growth mindset. Whatever that comes in, it's probably less than 140 characters. That's it. That's my deal.
Hey, it's math. It's math.
It is math.
I don't know how that sits with this group. Usually in a comp class, math is a forbidden
No
subject area, but yeah, I think that's a good equation. How about all of you? What questions do you have for Dr. Mitchell that might help you with your upcoming assignment?
Yes.
You were talking about how the president came up and talked to you, like in the middle of campus. Why do you think he was able to come up to you like that? Like, was that in the middle of the year when you kind of like seen his face before? Was it early on in the year? But like, I just am curious as to why, like, he came up and said
Yeah,
that.
good question. So it was the end of my senior year. It really happened the week of graduation. So like I mean, again, I had already committed to go to Ole Miss for law school, and I'm heading that way, and getting an apartment picked out, all those things, those life moments. And I've known him since my freshman year. I mean, it was just, he was pretty visible and wanted to interact with the students. Again, the campus is pretty small. I was pretty active too. That helped, I think. And I was a student athlete, so there was just a little bit more visibility. I did a lot of public address announcing in college when I was working as a student worker in media relations. So I was kind of known. And again, on the campus, when it's only 1,000 people, your student leaders tend to rise to the top a little bit. So he just knew who I was. And I don't know that he knew that much about me. I don't know that he knew that I was going to law school until I told him. But he had taken an interest and he thought I could benefit the college. And I think that's really why he got ahead of the job offer, to ensure that I would at least think about it. Because I'm not so sure that had he not done that, I don't know if the response would have been the same. But it was a transformation, you know, I tell that story in settings like this because it's a way, to honor him. But it's also a token of my appreciation to that occurrence because I didn't know it at the time, but it completely changed my life's trajectory. And certainly it has turned out to be a career-changing opportunity. But to the deeper answer, why, I really don't know. I don't know. I guess he was just interested, and which is cool. You should be interested in other people. Yeah. Yes.
So I guess you could say you're kind of in a niche thing with there's only around, around 134 athletic directors, at least D1.
Correct.
Do you ever look at guys from, so I'm an Alabama fan, so Greg Byrne brings in Saban, DeBoer.
Yeah.
Then Nate Oates leads into the Final Four. Do you ever look at
Yeah.
guys like that at other schools and kind of take notes and look at things, or even from what they do with students, like you were talking about the student things?
Yeah.
Look at them and kind of take notes and then make your own thing out of that.
Yeah, there's not a lot of recreating the wheel type of moments. Like we just kind of we learn from other things. It's no different than watching game film, right? We try to see tendencies of other teams and what they're doing. So yeah, I think there's some best practices that exist, but there's unique styles at different campuses. There's different cultures and things like that. Some things that work at Alabama may not work at Ball State, you know, and vice versa. But yeah, I think we're constantly kind of evaluating what's being done out, you know, at other places. And I look at, I've had the good fortune to visit with Greg before, and you know, Greg's style may be very different than mine, or we may be very much the same. It just kind of depends on the day, the situation. We deal with a lot of different scenarios throughout any given day. It's just part of comes with the territory. Go on. Yep.
When it comes to the like hiring process and when it comes to coaches, what is like one of the main things you look for to a coach? One of the things you look.
Yeah. Great question. So I've got a layered answer to that. So I look for three things. Okay. The first thing I look for is competitiveness. All these things start with a C, by the way. It helps me remember them, but it just happened to be that way. So now I get to remember it. Thanks for laughing. Competitiveness is number one. Like our coaches have to want to win all the time, right? And they want to win preparing their practice plans. They want to win when they're watching film. They want to win when they're recruiting. They want to win when they're advocating for a need for me, right? I've got to feel that intensity. Because I'm the same way. I want to do it too. The second thing is a level of competence. Okay. So you can be as competitive as you want, but if you're not competent about the X's and O's or recruiting or scheduling or, you know, whatever is entailed in whatever sport that they're coaching, then I'm less apt to hire them. Right? So you gotta be really competent, you gotta be really competitive. The third thing is you gotta be really connected. So you gotta be able to demonstrate that you're connected within the industry, because that helps you with scheduling. You've got to demonstrate that you can connect on the recruiting trail, because that helps with bringing in talent. You got to be able to demonstrate that you can connect with your fellow coaches within your department. You got to be able to demonstrate that you can connect with administrators. You got to be able to demonstrate that you connect on campus and in the community, right? So I would ask questions around all those things. And I have a pretty good idea over the course of a couple of different conversations about where those candidates are on that spectrum of competitiveness, connectedness, and competence. And that's really it's an easy framework, but it's proven to be pretty successful throughout my career.
We'll do you two, last two questions, Doug and Preston.
So obviously there's 19 sports here at Ball State. How do you manage like the daily basis? There's only like 24 hours a day, like spending time on each sport.
Yeah, so an hour a day, and then I sleep for the other 5. So we're set up in the department where members of our senior staff oversee different sports. And so those are the primary administrators for those sports. Those coaches deal with those senior level leaders. Of course, technically, the coaches all theoretically report to me, right? But because there's not a lot of time in the day, I can't possibly deal with 19 programs and the things that pop up on a day-to-day basis. But I do try to stay connected with them. So I will engage with our coaches, particularly after every competition, win or lose, at least acknowledge that I was paying attention. And but our administrators do a lot of the other work. Of course, we've got other, we've got compliance, we've got media relations, we've got sports medicine, we've got our marketing and ticketing, and we've got our corporate partnerships. I mean, there's different areas within the department that are interacting with our sports all the time and rely on them to do a lot of that leadership. But it all eventually flows up to me. I try not to be too much in the weeds because that can be very, very time consuming. And I trust that my colleagues will be able to handle some of those issues. And then there are situations though that demand that I be involved. I hope anyway that I have set expectations for my staff that they bring those situations to me, because I really don't like surprises, except maybe for a birthday cake, on my birthday. I'll take that. But outside of that, it doesn't behoove me to be surprised in the work life.
So I know when ADs first get to school, a lot of fans instantly start thinking about coaching changes. I think ADs like to make a mark right away. Maybe bring their own people with them. So I was just wondering, how do you balance making changes like that when you first get here versus trusting or working with coaches that were already at the school when you first arrived?
Yeah, great question. And I think that's a narrative that is common. I've learned over my career that you shouldn't go in with anything other than you're now a member of the team and you embrace the people that are working with you. And now, to be fair, there's an evaluation time, right? Where you're looking at programs, where you're evaluating other administrators or other staff members. And after a certain period of time, you begin to develop opinions. And maybe I would argue that those opinions should be rooted in some type of empirical evidence. But you start having conversations about what your vision is, what your expectations are, whether that's on the competitive side or whether it's just in general leadership and organization of the department. And the more clear you can be in the level of expectation, the better. And then that begins informing hopefully productive decisions about the future of the department. And it's very fluid. It's very fluid. So if anything, I made decisions about putting people that were here in different seats on the bus, so to speak, use that analogy, to help us become better. Trying to think, I've only, this is not a coaching conversation, more so on administrative side. I've reorganized a couple different times since I've been here, just based on people leaving, but not me letting them go. And one of my superpowers is to develop teams. I really love that. And I almost always look internally first to see if anybody fits a skill. So we've got a job opening right now. It's a senior level leader. And I've been pretty patient to see in any type of reorganization, does anybody that I currently have fit the skill that I need in this position? And I don't think that that's the case. That's not a disparaging statement. It's just these people are really good at what they do, and I put them on the right seat on the bus, and I need them to stay in that seat. So I'll look externally to find somebody to fill this particular role. But I constantly evaluate. Is the short answer to your question. I constantly evaluate.
All right, so I'm gonna stop the recording here.